My business was going really well, and I was doing great, had this warehouse in the UK, and then I get a call one day. Hey, the warehouse was robbed. They robbed everything. I lost overnight, didn't have an insurance, didn't have anything. And that was like a good portion of my money.
Dan Novias,
CEO of Mode Mobile and creator of the Earn Phone.
This young entrepreneur has built an empire of over $300 million. You are going to want to listen to this.
But at a high level, what Mode does is we pay you to use your phone.
In 8th grade language, how would it work?
You like to play Candy Crush, and Candy Crush is willing to pay a certain amount of money to make sure you play it. We take that money they're willing to pay, and we reward you per minute you play Candy Crush. We'll do that across the music you stream, the videos you watch, the stocks you trade. Literally think of every facet of your mobile journey. Our goal is to kind of unlock and create mutually beneficial opportunity between your usage and an advertiser.
How did you get the ball rolling in customer acquisition and then working alongside vendors?
My co-founder and I have been working together. We built that in a week, and this app literally went to the 6th highest in the iOS store at the time and the 66th highest grossing. And it was making like 20 grand a day, every day.
Wow.
I thought it was a glitch. I remember being in New York and I almost had a heart attack.
What do you think are the ingredients that make an app or a business a product market fit where the cash starts rolling in? What's the common denominators?
Yeah, and as long as you can.
Representing the Passionate Few podcast, Omar, the podcast rockstar, Elattar.
Omar's a rock star. Omar, it's Tony Robbins. You gotta be so proud of yourself, man.
Before we get into this epic interview, I have one quick ask. Well, we've had the privilege of reaching millions of people on the show. The data shows that almost 80% of you guys who watch the show aren't yet subscribed. So if you could do me one quick favor and click that subscribe button right now, it would mean the absolute world to us. Because when you hit subscribe, not only are you allowing us to grow the show, get bigger guests, ask better questions, but you're allowing us to honor our commitment to do everything in our power to help you take your life, your business, your health, your relationships to that next level. And with no further ado, enjoy the show.
Hey guys, welcome to this episode of the Passionate Few podcast. Today we have none other than Dan Novias. He's the CEO and founder of Mode Mobile. And today we're going to talk about his incredible story, what Mode Mobile is, and how you can use your mobile device in a way unlike ever before. So no further ado, thanks so much for being on the show today, Dan.
Thanks for having me on, Omar. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. So let's get into Mode Mobile. We'll talk a little bit about your story, but for the audience who doesn't know, can you give them a little high level of what Mode is, how quickly you guys have grown, and why you guys have got a ton of investors and a ton of interest right now in this product? It's very cool.
Yeah. So at a high level, what Mode does is we pay you to use your phone. The thesis behind it is that essentially there's 168 hours a week for everyone, right? Doesn't matter if you're a billionaire or not. And if you're sleeping 8 hours a day, then that drops down to about 115 hours. And of that, people are on average, utilizing their cell phones or their mobile phones 30 to 40 hours a week. Younger generation,
Right.
Gen Z, is 50 to 60. So if you think about it, you're spending anywhere from 1/3 to 1/2 of your waking life on your smartphone. And so when we looked at that, it was wow, that's a significant opportunity. And until literally the AR kind of contact lenses come, I don't really see the smartphone going away because they're getting better, the data is getting faster. And so the thesis behind our business model was hey, there are these $2,000 phones out there, like the Apple iPhones and stuff, and a ton of people using those. But there's also 6 billion people around the world that are using, Android phones, sub $150 devices. And, these brands are basically paying tons of money to these trillion-dollar companies, the Facebooks, the Googles of the world, for advertising and attention and all this stuff. So we're hey, is there a model that you can basically align those daily actions with advertisers and create, money and make the smartphone for you better? So, at a high level, that's kind of what Mode does.
And for most people who have no idea, how would this work in application? So say you have your phone, just to the average consumer,
Yeah.
like in 8th grade language, how would it work?
Yeah, basically you like to play Candy Crush, and Candy Crush is willing to pay a certain amount of money to, make sure you play it or find out about it. And we basically take that money they're willing to pay, and we reward you per minute you play Candy Crush for the first week that you play it. But we'll do that across the music you stream, the videos you watch, the stocks you trade, where you bank, where you read your news. like where you listen to your podcast, so literally think of every
Mhm.
facet of your mobile journey. Our goal is to kind of unlock and create some sort of mutually beneficial opportunity between you, your usage, and an advertiser. So that's really at the most simplest terms. Like we pay you to play games, listen to music, read the news, etc.
Very cool, man. And then for context, early adoption, how did you get people to try it out early, start getting users, start communicating and contacting, the different partners that ended up, being involved where they'd agree to actually pay? Because I'm sure that's a big undertaking. How did you
Yeah.
get the ball rolling in both customer acquisition and then also, working alongside vendors to do that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like we started out as a music product, and it actually wasn't.
The power of pivoting.
Oh, dude, yeah. I mean, the pivot. Like, I think honestly, I've been through more pivots. I think we must have been through like 12 pivots, honestly, through this business. And yeah, but for every pivot that you don't die, yeah, it's like a scar, that gets stronger over time. Yeah. So I think,
Yes.
for us, we started out as a music service, and it
Mhm.
wasn't working out very well, but we had this one type of user type that was using our service, and they tend to be more budget conscious consumers that had more time than they did money. And then we were like, why don't you pay for this? And then that's what we found out. And we're like, well, what if we paid you for your usage? Would you use it more? And they're like, yes, I for sure would use it more. And so we just literally opened up a wait list, like for people that wanted to get paid to listen to music. And we had like 250,000 people sign up. So it was kind of like
Wow.
during that time that, this is like 2018 circa on,
Sure.
during that time when like, Robinhood or like Nailbox or, Dropbox and these services were like having these referral systems. So that was a great way to just see, hey, they clearly people want this. They want this idea of getting paid for media. And then we actually launched it and started just getting a ton of organic installs. But the problem that we faced then was actually how to make money. So what you were saying is like, how do you actually monetize this? Because especially music, it's a really difficult business. It's like, it
Sure.
happens in the background, your attention isn't there. And so what we started doing is like, hey, you can play games and earn more or earn faster. And then that started making a decent amount of money. And then we moved into like other things that you do eventually, like charging your phone, unlocking your phone, shopping, like, and then we started just kind of expanding. And before we knew it, it was kind of like becoming kind of what we call like an earning operating system, which we call today like Earn OS. And then the idea of the phone was kind of something that just kind of stemmed from, building that phone from that software. Like, hey, if you had two devices and they're basically the same, but one pays you and one doesn't, what would be the difference of usage? And I literally flew to Hong Kong at this time. It was pre-COVID, and it was ready to make some sheds then. And then figured out that I could launch 5,000 phones for about 300K, which was like, that was the absolute minimum that you could do at the time. And we had enough traction. Like at the time, maybe we had a few 100,000, maybe even like a couple million, people in there. I can't remember the exact data, but I was like, I feel pretty confident that I could sell these 5,000 phones to our users, and they would be interested.
Wow. So you just took it. So you took a chance on that. 5,000 phones, 300 grand.
Yeah, yeah, we just took a chance on it. So it was kind of like, I was like, this is kind of a bigger vision, and
Right.
I guess like when you see I guess like the way that I justified it, and like we had raised some money, so I mean, but still, it was a big decision,
Yeah.
and I remember got a lot of people that were like, dude, being in hardware is like a terrible business. But I actually started. I had done some hardware stuff when I was in high school and then in college, like
Mhm.
more just on the ecom side. So it wasn't like insane. But when I was holding the phone, and this is like even in 2019, it's like, dude, this thing costs like $70, and this like at the time like this dinner, like the steak dinner cost $70. And I was like, which is ad do I get more value out of? And I was just like, dude,
Mhm.
this phone is $70. Like in my brain, it like couldn't compute. And so I was like, these will sell for sure. And so then we just did it.
Yeah.
So that's how I justified it.
Wow. And then what happens? You go to launch it, you go to market. What happens next?
Well, it took a lot longer than I anticipated because launching a phone is not trivial. So we had the manufacturer, and then you had to
Yeah.
brand it, you do all the stuff, you had to get it approved by Google, you had to get it there. Then COVID happened. It was like this whole thing, and then and basically we launched the website and started selling some of these, but where we actually started seeing a lot of the traction was, people were actually using their points. So when you're earning in our product, you earn points, then you can take those points and then basically, utilize it to redeem them for cash or gift cards or, variety of stuff. But we made one of the redemptions the phone. Hey, you can take $100 with your points and get this phone. And a lot of people were doing that. And then what we found is the people that did that actually used our product 2 times more. Like, even, and they were already using it a lot, but they were even using it now harder than they were. And so it worked out. It was amazing. Like honestly, the LTV metrics were amazing. I was like, wow, like it's a 3 times better retention, 3 times better earning. And so then I was like, oh, like we should make more of these, and then, but this time we're going to get it into stores. And then I went down that path, and that's where I think I started learning a lot about the business model because, and it was naive about it, to be honest. Cause like while we were able to move the first 5,000, the next, like, tens of thousands are very different. And then you learn these other things that you just don't know until you work with a retailer, how it works, and,
How old are you when you started the company in general, Mode?
well, Mode officially started maybe when I was like 28, or so. The idea was maybe 27, but my co-founder and I had been working together in another company that we kind of like had an app studio. And so we were kind of launching a bunch of different small products, and we had some exits along the way, and ultimately used some of those funds that ultimately became Mode. And then kind of, once all those assets were sold, and Mode started getting traction, we just stuck with that. So, I mean, I would say that concept started when I was 28, but, the ideas that kind of got us there was a culmination of like, ever since we were like, he was 18, he was in high school. We met on Fiverr, my co-founder and I, like met on Fiverr, like
No way.
when he was 17, and I was 22.
Wow.
And I had just graduated college, and then he built me an app for $85, and that's and then we launched an app really early in the ecosystem, and it made like 10 grand. I was like, wow, what a great return on investment, and
What app was it? What app was it?
so I used to own a website that was like a college music website. It was actually before Spotify was really big in schools. It wasn't on desktop yet, and basically, a million people a month would come listen to my playlists on their computers. And it was just an app for that service. And it was like, called like fratstars.com. So it was like super college fraternity.
That's cool.
Niche. And he did that, and then I basically convinced him to take a gap year between high school and college, and he did, because he was living in
Bad example,
yeah,
or a good example.
Well, I mean, it was actually kind of a crazy story because his so he's from the UK, right? And his and now that we talked about this many times, but it's like he had this opportunity to go to college, and I was actually pretty shocked that his parents allowed him to do this. But then I came to find out this crazy story where his dad, had started or was working at a startup, and this guy that he was working with was like, hey, we're going to start this like, chip manufacturer company. You should come join. But at the time he had just had his kids, and he's like, listen, I can't leave like my stability. I guess he's my co-founder's dad at the time. And I only learned the story like, 5 years later, when I talked to them, like trying to understand, like, why did you allow your 18-year-old son to move across the country with a stranger that you met on Fiverr to then start a company? And the guy that actually that asked his dad to be his co-founder actually was the guy that started ARM, the chip manufacturer, which is like a $10+ billion business, right? And it's not that, and his dad was very successful in his own right, he started companies over that, but his dad saw that like, oh, like, that
what could have been,
right? Yeah. And I think that's like something I always think is like just a crazy story where I'm like, wow, like, because I still have the Fiverr post of it. It was like, wow. that I was like, I'm looking at someone to build an app, or he actually had posted it. It was like, I was just looking what I can get on Fiverr, because it was like this, like it was new at the time, and I had gotten a really good return on this commercial I made. Anyways, for like $5. And then this guy's like, I'll build an app for $5. And I told him what I wanted. He's like, dude, I can't do that for $5. Well, I'll do it for $85. And then, didn't have any hopes for it, right? But then it turns out just to be some high school kid that wanted to do a side project early on in the iOS ecosystem. And and then we're still working together till this day.
What year was that you guys built that app, the first one?
So that app was built in 2025, probably like 2012, 2013.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was early. That
Early.
was like the Xcode days.
Yeah, he was using
When
Xcode.
people were just
It
starting
was
with
on
apps.
Xcode.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
I remember I used to download Xcode to try and use the app. You know what I mean? For like
Yeah,
the
very
test
cool.
flight wasn't even out yet, so it was like this whole
Very
thing.
cool, man.
Yeah, but then
fast forward today.
well, so
Go ahead,
then we had a crazy situation. So anyway, so he came for that year. We struggled for basically an entire year, you know, because we had this idea, oh, we're going to build this app builder and people can make apps without coding because we knew of all this stuff. And it never really took, you know, we made a little bit of money that was basically, you know, and then at the end, he was like, I have to go back to school. You know, it's like, we're not earning enough, but I'd happy to do this on a part time. And I was kind of bummed. I was like, Nat, like, my startup dreams are gone, you know? And then I was like, well, let's try one more app. I had this idea. And, you know, he's like, okay, I'm down before school starts, my freshers week, which is like their freshman, like welcome week. And he comes back and we built this app and it was the first ever Instagram liking app that you can, so if you remember the early Instagram, you can actually crack the popular page by the amount of likes you had. And what people would try and do is just get there because that would get a ton of organic reach. But they had a pretty good way of like spotting dots. So what we did is we created a exchange system where I could like your photo or follow you and you would get a coin. And then basically you can get someone to the top of the popular page just by that exchange system. But if you didn't want to do any of that, you could just buy the in-app purchase, right? So we built that in a week and this app literally went to the 6th highest in the iOS store at the time and the 66th highest grossing. So it was like us, New York Times, Plenty of Fish, and it was making like 20 grand a day, every day. And it was built in a week.
A day.
It was insane. And I thought it was a glitch. I remember being in New York and like I almost like had a heart attack, you know. I was like in a good way. And you know, it kept kind of just monetizing, making money right in that time. And then I was like, hey man, like look, we're on track to make $1 million, you know, this last month. Like you should drop out of school, you know, and we should like go all in on, you know, building like apps together and stuff. And he's like, I can't get a visa. And so then he's like if you can raise money to get a visa, the lawyer said that I could maybe get this one special visa. And so then that's what my focus was like, okay, I'm going to go figure out.
The O1B visa?
O1A. Yeah, that's what he got him.
O1A.
Yeah, so my co-founder now has a green card. It took us 10 years. He got it like about a year ago. And so we applied to, I had to go figure out how to get this visa. And so we ended up running into a random investor in Chicago that had sent me a LinkedIn message and was like, hey, like we're backing companies. I was like, hey, listen, like we're making $30,000 a day. I don't really need the capital, but I would be open to having a conversation, you know. And then ultimately met with them. They were cool. And then they were like, yeah, we're interested in investing in $1 million. And kind of gave us like a open book of like, hey, like build something that's going to add value. It was within the company of this. So there's some money that's coming in. But I was
that the first investment you ever got?
It was, yeah, especially a major one, like seven figure.
And how you said it was $1.5 million?
Yeah, $1.5 million. And it was like our seed round. And then at the same time, you know, I went to IU and I had Mark Cuban I got connected to him through, you know, another IU alum. And then Mark Cuban became an advisor. And so with that in mind, we were able to then submit the O1A component and then he got approved and then moved to the US about 2 years later. And it was like a whole thing, dude. So it was definitely a journey. And then it took us another 4 years of just building these apps, selling some of them, whatever. Didn't have any too crazy hits, never died. And then eventually, you know, stumbled upon Mode, learned a lot about, you know, ad arbitrage and how marketing works and all the stuff that kind of get us to where we're at today.
And with that first app, when it was making 20, 30,000 a month, it was just like you guys just hit the right vein and it was growing.
Hit the right vein, dude. We didn't take, it was just organic. I mean, we built a really nice growth loop. That was what we were really good at, like viral loops. Because one of the mechanisms also to get coins was like you can post the picture about the app to your Instagram profile, which is counterintuitive because, you know, people probably don't want to know that that's what they're using, but a lot of people didn't care. And at that time, like the reach didn't get suppressed, right? It was pretty early. Like Facebook maybe had just bought them like a year earlier or something. Like it was relatively recent. And it was just insanity, bro. Like I've never seen anything like it. And then everything was going great. And at the time, I remember us like, we were trying to see, this is one of my biggest mistakes, actually. I think, I mean, that now I've learned it. So I'm happy it happened the way it did. But at the time, like in reflection over the next 5 or 10 years, like something I've always thought about is that at the time we had like a great product market fit with that product. And it was like immediate, like you just know, there's been like 3 times in my life where I just see an immediate product market fit. And when it just hits so hard that you're just like, holy shit, this is insane. Whereas
what do you think makes the product market fit? Like, what do you think are the ingredients that make an app or a business a product market fit where the cash starts rolling in? What's the common denominators?
I think it's like, there has to be like clearly a demand, like has to be the timing. Like sometimes that's the luck is a timing. Honestly, I think timing is the biggest one. Obviously, there's a mechanism, obviously, that people like what you're doing, right? That has to happen. But the timing is so important because you can't be too early, you can't be too late. There has to be a complete need in the market, and no one's done it enough. But it has to be intuitive enough that people understand. So see, that's why it's so complex at that time.
Ride the wave on the way.
You ride the wave, but it has to be intuitive enough. And typically a new thing is not intuitive because people have to adopt it. So I think like, that's why it's kind of tricky. And every time I've hit it, it was kind of like an offshoot of something that was already kind of happening. And, and then sometimes you even make mistakes on it because even though that product was kind of buggy, like, I mean, we built it it was built in a week, like really, and it was kept breaking. And then we kind of figured it out, but we did it in kind of like a gray hat way, which is like because the API calls, like we were just getting too much traffic. So then we just were able to hit their private API, and you're not supposed to use that private API, but we couldn't get enough calls on the public API, and then it was working great, But then about 60 days later, we got hit up by Facebook legal. It's like, hey, like we're gonna sue you, if you don't stop this service and do that. And I'm like, well, what are we really doing though? You know what I mean? Like it doesn't say in your term of service that you can't create an exchange system. And it was this whole back and forth, and Apple like didn't necessarily get involved, and I didn't reply. It was just like, mismanaged. And then we got taken down from the App Store, unfortunately. And then like 20 other clones popped up, like, within that time because people saw that like how successful it was. And so a mistake was that we took our eyes off of something that was already working. There's probably was a way to figure out that model that it was compliant, and also, we'd be like, winners in the space. But typically sometimes you want to chase the shiny object when like the thing that is actually making you money isn't seem like something that's actually interesting. You know what I mean? Or it's not big enough. Like for me, that was always a thing. Like, oh, this thing that's actually doing really well, it's not big enough to my vision. And so I need to add more to it. But then I start focusing on the more, and the more is not quite hitting product market fit. And so you allow this thing that's actually working really well to go to, like to die potentially. Yeah. So now it's like something I'm always trying to, because you always see it as it's happening, So now I'm always trying to question myself if I'm doing that or not.
Hey guys, we'll get right back to this video in a sec, but first, I have a quick question for you. Given that the e-commerce industry is growing by the trillions year over year, have you ever dreamed of owning your own e-commerce business like many of the guests we've had on the show, but maybe you feel stuck on how to start? Well, if so, you're not alone. The truth is, starting and setting up your own online store can be incredibly time-consuming, complicated, and get expensive. Not to mention the hassle of researching top products and staying on top of market trends that make you money. Lucky for you, that's where today's sponsor, StoreBuild.ai, comes in. With StoreBuild.ai, you instantly get a free custom-built, AI-driven store loaded with 20 winning products and a custom theme that can help you generate sales. All you need to do is head to StoreBuild.ai, enter your info, then simply sign up to Shopify for free, choose your store's look and feel, and voila! They'll send you your custom-built store ready to generate sales. The whole process is lightning fast. Whether you're just starting out or want to grow, StoreBuild.ai makes launching an online store easier than ever. So why wait? Visit StoreBuild.ai, and in less than 5 minutes, you could have the e-commerce business you've always dreamed of. Thanks to StoreBuild.ai for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back to the show.
Yeah, no, that makes 100% sense. Yeah, a lot of entrepreneurs run into that. I think Hermosi talks about that. He had a successful business going, and then he started a supplement company and then a nutrition company, and then he's like, what the hell am I doing? If I would have just focused on the one company, I would have grown that one bigger than the 3 or 4 other fun ideas that are, more sexy or more compelling, or that you have a competitive advantage in.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Keep the one thing, right? Keep the main thing the main thing.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of you pivoting, I know early on in high school you also had some early entrepreneurial endeavors, and then you kind of like kept going. What for you drove the ambition entrepreneurially, right? We'll get into more about Mode and some of the things you do there, but I'm curious because I feel like a recurring pattern with you is like, even just talking to you, I can tell your brain's always like, well, what if we did this? What about a creative solution to this? Well, that got taken down. Well, what if we find a guy who, classic entrepreneurship is like problem solving like that. Was that something innate in you younger, or where did that hunger come from initially? That ambition come from? Because most kids in high school don't have that. You know what I mean? Aren't pushing on the gas that hard. Where did that come from for you?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't actually know what the word was, when I was a kid, like, the entrepreneurship word. It was just more how I was wired. I think, I don't necessarily know where I was always like an inquisitive kid, like I remember I was like texting my wife this story, like maybe a few months ago or something. It was like, remember like this parent took me to baseball and I was like 11 and I was, or something like that, 12, 13. And I started baseball very late, comparatively speaking to most people. And I remember like driving the van, I was like, wow, this is really nice Ford Windstar. Like this guy has a nice leather seats here. This must be the XC edition, right? And it's like that cycle was going through my brain as an 11-year-old. I was like, this is a premium van. Like my family's been looking for vans. I wonder how much he paid here. Did he finance this? And then I was just trying to like, and then I just asked the question, like, how much you pay for this van? And the parent was so taken back, and I don't know why that is stuck in my brain 26 years later or 25 years later, but it was just like how I was wired. I was just always looking at, trying to understand numbers, trying to understand how people were getting stuff, why they were getting stuff, why I wasn't, necessarily getting stuff, or, just how things worked. And, I think, I grew up between two countries like my whole life, right? I'm from Brazil originally, but I grew up in Southern Indiana. And so you saw very different components of cultures and what things cost, how things operate. And so, a lot of these entrepreneurial kind of like activities was always sometimes like, when I actually then learned, hey, like I can't just keep asking my parents for stuff because they say no, then what do I do now? And then I had a couple instances of that. And then, when I was 15 or 16, like I had this, job at this Polo store, and I was working at this outlet mall. And then the outlet mall, I had a job for a grand total of like 4 days. Really came to that realization that, money's hard to come by. Because I was 16, I was trying to get a sound system for my car at the time, I remember. But then this big tour bus of, Japanese people came to the store, and it was at the Polo, and they dropped 60 grand. It was just me and this one other kid, and we handled all of it. So I'm thinking I'm going to get a commission, because I took care of all these people. And 2 days later, like this manager comes in and says, hey, you guys did a great job. Here's like, a little token of our appreciation. And it was a $5 Arby's gift card. And I was like, are you kidding me right now? Like and not to sound like, how they're like, these young kids don't know the meaning of hard work, but I'm like, dude, like these guys dropped $60,000. And I was like, if they had known that I had a 40% off discount, I could have given them 20 and I would have gotten 12K. And then that's when I had this epiphany idea that day. I was like, I could sell these items online. And I still went around with my Palm Trio at the time, and I'm taking photos of every barcode in the store. And then I found this leather jacket that was, $700 or $800 in the normal store, $400 in the outlet. So, and it would get marked down to $300. And then with my discount, it was like $160. And then I saw it on eBay for $330, and they were selling all day. So I just bought 3 with my dad's emergency credit card that he had given me, and kept the receipt because I knew I can get the money back. Put them all on eBay that night, sold all 3 that night, made like $800. And I was like, holy shit. And then that's like where really everything started. And then I did that for around 4 or 5 months, got everyone in the store buying these jackets for me. I was paying people $20, made like 30 grand.
You learned about arbitrage.
Yeah. And then that's how I got my starting capital. Then moved into electronics. Then I would always find these like weird little intricacies between different markets, and the arbitrage was always a big part of that. And I think that international kind of mindset always kicked in. Like one of the big ones that I had in college, and this kind of actually ties into the phone component, was that, at the time in the US, like Sprint and Verizon, BlackBerry was like the biggest thing. And those two companies operated on like CDMA, which is a specific type of bandwidth or like, it's like it wasn't a SIM card, chip like AT&T and stuff. And but international, when you take those phones, that doesn't exist. So what a lot of people do or were doing is that they buy these phones and they stop paying their bills, right? Or companies would stop paying their bills. So these phones would literally become paperweights. Like you literally couldn't do anything with the phone because they do is they ban the serial number and the phone doesn't work anymore. And so then I would buy them because they'd be like 80% off, because there's nothing to do, but you can unlock them and then sell them, and they'd work in Australia, they'd work in the UK. And I was making like $125 on an item that was costing me $80. And then I set up a company in Australia. I hired a taxi cab driver that drove me there to like dispatch it for me. Did that in UK. And that's the business I ran all through high school and college, and I was doing a couple $1 million a year in sales, all through basically eBay arbitrage at the time.
Do you remember the first time you had $1 million in your bank account as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, honestly, it's not, it wasn't actually like that early on, to be honest, because like because you're making money on the churn, or not the churn, but like the cash flow. It's moving. Yeah. So, and then if you get a hit, like, so this actually what got me into digital was, and these are the missteps that you kind of learn over time, or not necessarily a misstep. I mean, you don't know when these things are gonna happen, but one time I just moved to Chicago, and I was 22, and this is right before, maybe 1 year before I met my co-founder at the time. And my business was going really well, and I was like, doing great, had this warehouse in UK. And then I get a call one day, hey, the warehouse was robbed. And I was just like, what do you mean? And it's like, yeah, they robbed everything, and, it was me and one other guy was doing a similar system. And, I lost $100K overnight, didn't have an insurance, didn't have anything. And that was like a good portion of my money, right? Like liquid. And you have other money tied into other places, but that was that. And I was like, dude, like, I went right back to sleep because I thought it was a dream. And then I woke up and I was like, damn, this is reality. And then that's actually why I got into digital stuff because, even though you can get hacked, but at the time hackings were very common, or at least not as publicized as they are today. And I was like, I got to move into a different industry because physical stuff can get stolen, So, these are the kind of endeavors and the ups and downs that you learn.
The scars along the path.
Yeah.
The scars along the path. I love it. So a series of pivots, a series of entrepreneurial endeavors since high school. You had some wins, some losses, ups, downs. You meet your co-founder. You're now a decade in. Now, fast forward to Mode Mobile. Was there iterations of it beyond, like, I know you mentioned initially it was like music rewards.
Yeah.
Where do you see the initial, like, oh, okay, this is actually what the opportunity is? And how do you see Mode growing into the future? And what's the competition landscape look like? Yep. You know what I mean? Like, paint the picture of what the vision is now with Mode.
Yeah. I mean, the business has evolved a lot. That idea, I think, was just kind of like the initial idea. And really we see kind of earn phone as a category, and I think the biggest difference of the vision of like me going to, China to go make a phone versus now was kind of like, I don't want to be a hardware manufacturer. It's a really hard business to do. And there's companies that have been around for 40, 50 years manufacturing electronics that do it way better, get way more distribution. But where there's really interesting opportunity is kind of like seeing adjacent markets. I think that's always an important thing to see is like, hey, is there a similar market to what I'm doing, but not exactly what I'm doing? So in my example, for example, there's like Roku, right? Roku is one of the biggest companies that power, smart television. And the way they make money is they partner with TV makers like Panasonic or TCL to power their smart TV. And the reason that TVs have went from $2,000 to like $100 is because all the money's being made while you're streaming on it, right? And there's 2 hours per day of the average household, where a phone is 6 hours per day, and there's way more phones in the world than there are TVs. So I looked at it and I was like, well, this company struggled because actually it was an offshoot of Netflix, and now it's a $10+ billion company. But no one wanted this business. And then in 2015, they went public finally. And the big aha of their model was the distribution through this mechanism of like, working with the manufacturers and using their technology to power this. So then I looked at that in the smartphone market today, where I was like, hey, there's these sub $150 phones. There's billions of them around the world. And, it's not the 1 billion iPhones, it's these 6 billion Androids. And, 95% of those are like smaller, cheaper devices. But the people that are making those phones, like the average margin's like 1%. So imagine making $100 product and you making $1 on it, That
Right.
is what they're making. And those are typically the people that are most budget conscious, that are having the toughest times paying their bills, that are most impacted by inflation, that are most likely to do gig work. And so the way I started thinking about it was like, well, that's a category, in itself. And so, that's kind of like the future is like, really what we envision is like Samsung Earn Phone, Motorola Earn Phone, where we can power the technology of it. And that to me is $100 billion+ business. If you can get that right, like you change the entire space, like landscape. You make the phone free, you make it better, you make it a opportunity to earn income from. And that's like moonshot businesses. So it's kind of like aligning all the things that I've always liked with a moonshot concept, and then just trying to figure out how to do it in a better, smarter way. That's the things I'm still learning today, of kind of like building more sustainable businesses and finding like intricacies in your business model that make sense to scale.
Sharpen.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of like, where we're heading in the future.
Very cool, man. And then in terms of investors, I know you guys got a lot of investors as well. Can you give kind of context on that side of things? I know you guys open it up to investors and also have quite a bit of people investing. Any context on that side of things?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is one of these kind of times where you also realize one of these ups and downs, right? So for us, like, we had this insane growth. I mean, from 2019 to 2022, we grew 32,481% in revenue growth. And, we were the fastest growing software company in all of America, as measured by Deloitte. And we were making a lot of money at the time from fintech companies and crypto companies. And in 2022, there was then the Terra Luna bust and the FTX and that plus all of this, like the free capital kind of all busted. And we got hit really hard, from advertisers, and that didn't pay us, that went bankrupt, that stopped advertising, and my business model changed. But I was in this weird state as a company. I was no longer a seed company. I wasn't even a Series A company, but I also wasn't a Series B company, and I hadn't taken in money from one of these big VCs yet. And all of those guys are underwater because their companies, the model of the VCs is like, hey, like when you're in that growth stage, then the company goes public, you get liquidity and all good. But those guys are all underwater. And go look how much money SoftBank lost, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was like, this is only going to get worse. For sure, it's going to be harder to raise money. So then I was like, how do I learn how to pay my users less without making them not use my platform? And then how do I raise enough money to continue on the business? So two very difficult equations to figure out. And then we had this idea. I was like, well, what if we allowed our users to become shareholders in the business? And we paid them shares as well. And then I went through the process of learning about crowdfunding, and, it took me like a year. Like we had to get audited financials. There's a lot of work. But the idea then was like, hey, I could build like, the largest shareholder community in the world. They kind of 1 million shareholders because we have so many consumers, over 45 million people have installed our software. And then the next component was like, well, how do I, bring money into the company and also market the company without losing money? Because now it's all about, maintaining profits, being efficient. And that's how we, really decided to go in on it 100%. And so the idea was like, hey, like, the people that are decision makers at the Motorola's, the Verizons, the AT&Ts of the world are reading newsletters. They're reading like a different type of publication than our consumers are. Like they're, our average consumer is like the same type of person that you're going to see, in a rural town shopping at Walmart or whatever it might be. That's a different type of person that's going to make the decision at, AT&T, whether they're going to launch an Earn Fund or not. And so the idea for us was like, well, if we could bring in investors and advertise through those channels and get paid to market, we get all the marketing dollars for free, we bring in money, and we make our, at the same time, we allow our consumers to become shareholders. So now the paradigm goes from, users, which is how most platforms refer to their consumer base, to earners. And now we're taking earners and turning them into owners, right, in the business. And so you have this army of people that can do stuff. And so we went down that path about 2 years ago. And the first crowdfund we ever launched, we sold out in 3 months. And you can only raise $5 million. We raised $6 million. We had to refund $1 million almost. And then we did another one this year, or at the end of last year. And we were north of 30 million raised with over 40,000 shareholders.
Wow, that's incredible. And you said early on, you guys had over 45 million people have downloaded products you've been involved with?
Not just products, just Mode. Mode by itself has over
Mode?
40. Well over 45 million installs.
Hey guys, quick question. Have you been enjoying this video, but you're thinking to yourself, man, I love this content, but I want to learn how to grow my brand or my business? Well, if your answer is yes, you're not alone. In fact, millions of entrepreneurs deal with this exact same issue. And it's something that I've learned the answer to from interviewing 7, 8, and 9-figure entrepreneurs around the world. And this philosophy that solves all that is a concept called who, not how. Now, the who, not how philosophy states that anytime you're stuck on the hows to get to the next level in your life, your brand, or your business, that there's always a who to help you get there. And it's for this exact reason that I'm super excited to announce that I've officially launched our brand new Passionate Few community to help you do exactly that. And yes, it's 100% free. Join me and the thousands of other entrepreneurs that can help you make your life, your business, and your dreams a reality. With no further ado, let's get back to the video.
Wow. And for you, what do you notice about the trend or how it catches? Like, for example, for somebody who like hears that and might have their own, product or app or whatever it is, like when you talk about going from 0 to 45 million people adopting the product, what do you find happens when waves catch? Like, what are the common denominators of waves catching for download usage like that?
Yeah, I mean, I see. It's like it's a good question because it's like,
I don't know.
yeah. I mean, you do something again. It's like the timing.
That's true.
You have to know. You have to find the niche of that someone's like wanting to do. And this kind of goes back to we were talking about this pre-show, where it's like something I realized, and if I can go back, I think it's actually way easier to like buy a business that already has some sort of traction and product market fit, and it's way less risky, and buy from an operator that wants to leave their business. We've been looking at that internally where, one thing that we realized for our product is like a lot of the ways that we make money today is like, we'll work with like a TikTok or a Robinhood or, these big companies that I'm never going to own because they're worth like tens of billions of dollars. But they'll pay us some sort of like fee, like, hey, here's $10, and we want users to do X, Y, Z. And then it's done. That transaction's done. So then I had this idea. I was like, well, there's all these very profitable apps out there and products that are like niche, like, the guy that made the sleep cycle app I use every day, the guy that does the photo filter app, the dude that did like, the Instagram app I just did, or like some game.
Oh, the NGL. There's like the NGL Not Gonna Lie app.
That like that. Stuff. Yes, exactly. Yeah. These random apps, right? Small teams, 5 guys, whatever. But many of these people are earning a few $million a year, running as a lifestyle business. And this isn't any industry. And in many cases, like other industries is happening is like a lot of boomers have very profitable businesses. Their kids don't, want to do the businesses, and there's going to be a big wealth transfer. They need to get out of that business, and you can buy those businesses that are already successful, revamp it, make it smart, make it technologically savvy. And you now have found something that already is hitting, right? You're just adding fuel to the fire because you're reinvigorated with new energy. And in many cases, you can have a lot of creative financing to get that. And I think that that's actually a way better way to go about it. So we're applying our own methodology of how to do that within our organization. But, if I was starting over again, I would probably do that first as opposed to starting from 0 to 1, because 0 to 1 is like, it's a crapshoot. You have no idea.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that. Another, we did an interview on another way to sort of apply that same anecdote is we interviewed, are you familiar with Brian Johnson?
Yeah,
he's
for
like
sure.
the big health guy.
For sure.
He sold Braintree.
Follow all the stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, he sold Braintree Venmo for I think it was 800 million.
Yep.
Yeah, it was like 800 million. And he's working on a bunch of new projects. We got to film with him in his house. Crazy surreal experience to have him on the show. And he was sharing with us something really interesting. He said in the payment processor space that at the time, the mistake is that a lot of payment processors were trying to go B2B and B2C all in one, right? Whereas the companies that actually ended up succeeding, they succeeded when they were either just B2B or B2C. So what he did is he realized that he saw the writing on the wall for that. So one thing they did is they strategically, when they had Braintree, they realized that was a B2B model for payment processing. And they realized instead of trying to add or start from scratch, why don't they acquire Venmo? So they actually acquired Venmo. I think it was for relatively cheap. I think it was something like 24 million bucks or 20 relative to Venmo's scale. So they bought that. So when they bought that, they bundled that with Braintree, and now they were a B2B, B2C solution, and it's a much bigger multiple that was super attractive to PayPal, which then ended up leading the exit. So he was talking to us about that too, is that a lot of times, like whether it's from scratch or, in a roll-up capacity or in some capacity like that, that a lot of times that's the right move, right? Similar to how you mentioned earlier, how Facebook bought Instagram for like $1 billion, or how Google bought YouTube for $1 billion.
Yeah, and then
compared to
then
how much
they
those
put
companies
it
are worth
into
now.
their ecosystem. But I mean, I think the way
Yeah.
this mathematically makes sense, because there's actually something that never really clicked for me until like sometime last year. I really dove deeply into this last year, and read a bunch of great books around it. But it was like, basically like, you know, when a business is like in that 0 to 1 million, 1 to 5, 5 to 10. I mean, maybe you'll get anywhere from like 1 to 3, maybe 4x EBITDA multiple. It
Multiple.
depends on the industry, but in any cases, and circumstances change and whatever. But once you start getting to like 20, 50, 100, it starts really scary. So I might be able to actually acquire an asset that's like at a 2x EBITDA multiple. But because of the scale of my business and my industry and my revenue profile,
Mm,
I can basically command
plug
a
it in.
15x EBITDA multiple. So I'm basically getting, as long as things don't change at all, and like you got to be thoughtful about the businesses you're buying, but you basically get 13x for free. So if it's making 1 million and you buy it for 2 or 3 or whatever, and then you can get 13, like you basically just made $10 million in value, right, from your company. So
Right.
that's why these PE shops do roll ups, right? And when I learned, I was like, wow, like this is insane. Like, why did I not do this 15 years ago? Or I wish I would have known this
Yeah.
sooner. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it was like this whole thing. So now it's like a big focus for us of like, because it makes sense for our ecosystem, because like we already have this ecosystem that's really focused on, hey, we're going to expose you to new products. But now instead of the products, like, yeah, we're going to work with these big brands that everyone uses, but we're also going to go find these like random niche games and these like good little products that people like, that were built by these small little teams, that are just assets that we can own, and we monetize and do that. So it's kind of like an interesting model that anyone that's like thinking about getting in, like I would encourage you to read it. There's some great books out there, like I just listened to one called Main Street Millionaire. She talks about a lot of Cody Sanchez. I don't know if you
Cody
know who she is.
Sanchez. Yep.
Yeah, so she has like a lot of boring businesses that you can do, like, and start really small. There's like the Harvard HBR guide to buying a small business. Buy not sell, or buy versus build, something like that. There's like the three major
Mhm.
ones that I would encourage you reading. But man, it's super interesting stuff, like, to be honest.
That's awesome. And then a question I have too is, in terms of utility or users, what kind of rewards, points, or earning potential can users potentially gain when using Mode Mobile?
Yeah, I mean, we have like kind of a couple different types. Like, we've done like the variable rewards in the past, where people win like that big check and they win like 50K or whatever it is. But we try and
Yeah.
like, be relatively reasonable on what, like, we don't like to overpromise of what people are going to earn. But we do have people that earn, several, thousands, and probably even tens of thousands of dollars a year in it. But I would say on average, like the goal is like, around $100 is kind of where we want to be
Mhm.
in the US, and it's relative to your country, right? But buying power wise, that's kind of like the goal is, you're not there. It's like the thesis is like, look, Uber created a monster market, with the
Mhm.
ride sharing, and Airbnb the same, with homes. But not everyone owns a car, not everyone owns a house, but everyone owns a smartphone. And so you're not going to earn the same amount as owning these big assets that cost a lot of money to acquire.
Mhm.
But you can earn enough. And then also now with the phone being like the main stay of how you learn and access to information and opportunity, it's like,
Mhm.
it's just the best way to create opportunity for people, in that way.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people use it for, gas money, presents for their kids at the end of the year, phone bill, or just like, a little bit of extra cash.
That's awesome, man. And then, question I have from the business standpoint, I'm sure potential investors would be interested too, is, from an entrepreneurial perspective, how is it when you're approaching these different companies and pitching this idea? Because I'm sure for a lot of companies that you guys probably enrolled into the program, was probably relatively foreign idea. How do you go about approaching some of these companies that then collaborate with you guys in terms of rewards and points, that kind of a thing? Like, what does it look like for an entrepreneur who, like, sees that model, goes, "That's fascinating." What does
Yeah.
that process look like to go from zero to getting the conversation going?
Yeah. I mean, we're still trying to perfect it ourselves, to be honest. Like, I'm like, we started off with like working with a lot of like solutions that already were doing that we could plug into. And
Mhm.
then, the next phase of that was kind of then, uh, doing a lot of affiliate centric stuff, and then just kind of like educating people about how it would work, essentially with the model itself. So, you don't want to, it depends like what business like you're in, but there's often networks that you can like tap into. That's where I would start so that you're earning some money, like, the equivalent of like what a programmatic network would be, so that you're
Mhm.
just seeing like, hey, here's what the model is. And then you can basically see, okay, if I was able to figure out direct selling, and where there's someone that's advertising there quite often, then, you could probably go reach out to that person like, hey, look, I've noticed that you guys are spending a lot through this intermediary. Do you just want to go direct? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so you can start somewhere so that you're starting to earn money and get that supply, but you don't want to wait too long, because like that's something that we did. Like we often just focus on, we kept our team lean very purposely, and now we're starting to actually grow our sales team.
Mhm.
Because there is a cost, there's a cost to growing sales and stuff. And, especially when the market's like kind of fluctuating, you want to kind
Right.
of, do that. But that's what I would recommend definitely, is like just tapping into the networks that, you can start getting some money in. See if there's like, you know, some product market fit, and then basically make assumptions of what's next, of what you can take it to.
Mhm. Dude, that's awesome. And then last question I have for you, like related to the business side of things, back end, is like, for example, when you look at the landscape of, where business is in 2025, how consumers are changing, what are some things you think are happening in the landscape, in the marketplace, that actually lean towards why people are more likely to adopt things like Mode
Yeah.
into the digital ecosystem?
Yeah, I think there's two major things that we're seeing. It's like rewarded is being very, very common a model now, because
Correct.
you see a lot of stuff with GDPR, CCPA, a lot of these privacy acts. People really coming to the attention that, hey, like, data is like basically the new digital oil, and fundamentally, like,
I like that, digital oil. It's true.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then be like, I'm the product. Like, if you're free, you're the product. And I think that you know that will be more and more common, that you are going to be compensated for your attention and data, because that's the most limited and precious asset that we have, is our attention and our time. And so I think that that's something that we're starting to see in society, especially as screen time continues to go up. And so that's definitely a tailwind. And I think that you're starting to see that in even like, I mean, it's very much in our niche, but you know, uh, like gaming companies and Google, like Google just last week like opened up the fact that you can do like skill-based cash gaming and like incentive-based
Oh,
gaming
wow.
on its ad network. And like this is a stance they had for a decade. So I think that um it makes sense, like with where we're heading, to reward people uh because they are ultimately monetizing this time, right? And more that we're spending on digital services, the more that that's going to happen.
That makes sense. And the fact that the money's being spent anyways to acquire those customers is like, well, instead of giving it to advertisers or having a middleman, why not just give it to the consumers for the utility of it?
Right.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, and as long as you can align the incentive, I mean, you have to make sure the framework is correct with the consumer. Like, don't pay them to install your app because then they're just going to do install it. But if you pay them to use the app, for a period of time as a loyalty, then it creates a habit, and they're happy about it, you're happy about it, and then that's a way more equitable model.
Yeah, and you can incentivize utility
Yeah.
100%. Now, in terms of people wanting to get involved or people wanting to learn more, is there any upcoming things related to Mode that people could be, on the lookout for,
Yeah.
or ways they can get in touch, connect?
Yeah, I mean, you can check out our site, invest.momobile.com. We do like free shares through. You could also download our app and claim free shares in the company. No money that you need to put down on it. If you do want to invest, you can go to that domain or website, and feel free to reach out, to our investor relations team, or invest@momobile.com with any questions. But I would encourage anyone to come and claim some free shares, use the product, and it's, no, you can get $15 just for downloading it. So it's not really a risk that you would take. And if you're an entrepreneur, I would encourage you just to check out the concept of crowdfunding, because it's like something that's super powerful. You're able to align value with your consumers, and you're really taking the power back from just having to really rely on VCs and gatekeepers that are kind of saying, hey, yes, I'm going to fund you, or I'm not. And you kind of, if you could be a marketer, if people believe what you believe, you can, create some amazing things with it to see your vision through.
I love that, man. That's awesome. And what's your target in terms of users? I know you mentioned there's like 45 plus million.
Yeah.
What's the vision for you? Obviously, I'm sure a billion is the dream word, but 100 million is probably next on the horizon.
Yeah.
What's the vision for you for Mode Mobile a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road? What's it look like? If life was
Yeah,
perfect?
actually, with one of our acquisitions that we recently just did for the app sides, like we now have over, this is all time installs, right? But, over
Yeah.
200 million, probably 150 million installs amongst our two core products. But yeah, man, I think that, like, the goal is to have this be, it's not just about getting the users. I think that's like one component of it. It's like international. We're still in kind of like a beta phase, but I would love to then have like, like my goal is to be at a point where it's like, hey, we have like 50 million DAO. You know what I mean? Like if I can get 50
Yeah.
million daily active users, that would be amazing. You know what I mean? So it's just like, how do you make the model that good? And that's a work in progress. But I see it as like something that, with this business model that we're going after, it's something that I think is quite possible to get to those types of figures. You essentially change an entire industry, right? And that's always something I've really wanted to accomplish.
Dude, that's awesome. Well, Dan, I appreciate you sharing all that. I do have one more bonus question, and it's for entrepreneurs who are watching this. And that is, for somebody who's looking to get started, I know you mentioned buying your own business is something to, you'd recommend for some people, investing in businesses that are already working as a part of it. But say someone is just starting, the young version of Dan Noveas, so to speak, and he's in that, or she is in that precipice of wanting to start something, wanting to launch something, but maybe feeling stuck, feeling limited. What would be your best piece of practical advice for entrepreneurs out there of any age, men or women, who are, whatever it is, maybe it's they're trying to start an app and they're like, dude, what's step 1, 2, 3? You said you met your app developer on Fiverr. It seems like a recurring theme for you is like imperfect action, right? Just trying the thing, getting momentum, even to now, iterating. We've sat down with billionaires who tell us that, we sat down with John Paul DeJoria from Patron Tequila, and he told us he sold the company for 5.1 billion. And he told me off record, he goes, like, half the problems in the business, I have no clue how to solve. So for lack of a better expression, everyone's winging it. But with all your experience in business and all the ambitions you have going, what advice would you give to people out there, trying to take that step, but maybe feel stuck on how to make their dreams a reality?
Yeah, I mean, I think people often don't start because of what you're saying, like a fear of failure of some sort. But I think that does it suck to fail? Yes, but like it doesn't. There's no harsher critic than yourself, and people don't give a shit. People only care about the things that are focused for them, in that sense. And we're often very critical about ourselves. Of what are people going to think about me? But really, you're the number one critic. So you got to like just go out and fail, I guess, in that sense, and try it. But I think the one thing that's amazing now is that, one, like, there's so many pieces of content out there, if you're already listening to this type of stuff. And then now with like, ChatGPT, you have someone that can actually learn about your type of personality, or not someone like an agentic being, learn about your being. What are the research tools out there? Like, hey, I only have $100. Like, how do I get started? What are some ideas? Let me talk through it. Continue talking about it. I use it a lot just to brainstorm, like if I'm trying to get through an idea, and then that can get you started. You know what I mean? And I think that, the idea of buying that business, or, there's apps that are like out there for like, that are generating $1,000 a month that people are willing to sell for $500, or maybe not $500, but $2,000. And, you can have something, you start there, you get going. And there's a lot of ways to get going. And if you don't want to start something, go find a great mentor that's willing to like intern, like, in that sense. Like for me, I'm like looking for that type of person right now, where it's like someone that I can trust, that can execute something. If they want to earn a paycheck, but learn how like I go about solving problems, that's a great way to, learn fast and how other people do it, so that you do it yourself. So those are probably like the number one, things to keep in mind that I would always think about.
I love it, man. Well, Dan, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for hopping on and talking about Mode. Any final words of wisdom, or places people can get in touch with you guys, connect with you?
No, I mean, I really appreciate you having this on. And if they, feel free to shoot me a note at dan@modemobile.com, or, follow me on any of the socials. If you just Google my name, there's not that many of me with my same name. And, happy to connect and provide any, helpful insights from here. But I really appreciate you having this on.
Awesome, Dan. Thanks so much for hopping on, brother. Appreciate you sharing. Guys, make sure to like, comment down below if you have any questions. Check out Mode Mobile and hit that subscribe button. We'll see you guys on the next episode. Peace.